Hi, I'm Bobby Helsel, Manpower Superintendent.
My name is Keith Engle, Project Manager for Canada Electrical Construction.
Today we want to talk to everyone about rework. Rework is one of the largest causes of waste and non-productive time in the job site.
Anything we can do to minimize rework or non-productive time, we should capitalize on, and that's what we want to talk to you about today.
There's about 6 common causes of rework. We'd like to go through each one of them. So Keith, let's go through those 6 reasons for rework. The first one that comes to mind for me is poor craftsmanship or inexperience.
Big one for me is wrong interpretation of the drawings or the specifications, prints that you have on the job site.
I think that's one of the main causes to wrong layout before you even start the task.
Yeah, and taking wrong work instructions and receiving wrong work instructions, I think is another big cause of rework.
Another one that really sticks out to me is poor planning and scheduling.
And to build on that, poor planning and scheduling, the most frustrating one for us is general GC causes. Anything that causes rework from the GC direction, I think frustrates the job site a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we see that from general contractors. We even see it from other trades. That cause us to have to go back and change some of the things we've already put in.
It's hard to stay away from, but we need to minimize it.
Absolutely. And we need to make sure that we're capturing costs when we get into those situations.
So why don't we dive down into the causes a little bit and talk about what we can do to minimize them or eliminate the causes of rework on the job sites. You want to touch on the poor craftsmanship and inexperience?
Sure. So poor craftsmanship and inexperience, what that means to me is maybe it's a lack of effort from the tradesmen. Maybe they're rushing. All those things could really lead to just that poor craftsmanship where, they put something in, it just wasn't quite right, and now we have to go back and fix it.
Do you think a lot of people are trying to push the schedule and get things done quickly to eliminate things in the future and really cause themselves heartaches on the back end?
I think every situation is probably a little bit different, Keith. I mean, I do think there's times where, you're being rushed, you're being pushed, we have deadlines, we have things like that. That kind of leads me to that old saying is sometimes you don't have time to do it right the first time, but we always make time to do it again. So it's one of those things where you just have to be aware of that. You have to take your time. Even though there's a push, even though there's a rush, it's still very important to do something correctly the first time.
Absolutely. So I'll take the second one and kind of go through interpreting the drawings or specifications and prints incorrectly. The biggest thing overall is we need to make sure we have the most up-to-date documents. We need to have the right processes and procedures in place to make sure all the field guys are working off the same thing. PlanGrid is a great tool for that. Make sure PlanGrid's updated. If the GC is using Procore, make sure everybody's on the same drawings. And that's a big job of mine is making sure the field has that information. And I need to ensure that it's all on the tablets or out in the field. Wrong interpretations. I think the big thing is you need to ask questions if you're not understanding. Questions are never a bad thing. We always like questions. Make sure you get the right interpretation, and if you don't know what's going on, ask.
And I think that's a great segue into our next point, which is the wrong layout before even starting the task. Again, that becomes an issue when we don't have up-to-date drawings. We don't have enough electronics on the site, whether it be iPads or computer with a screen where the guys can get that most up-to-date information. That causes you to, sometimes you end up working out of sequence. You've got to go back in and move something for someone else. And again, some of that goes to little notes and things on the drawing. Maybe it's a height of receptacle changes in a room or something like that. And if we're not looking at the most up-to-date drawings and we're not doing that proper layout and ensuring that layout's done before we get started, then we're gonna have to go back and do it again.
Yeah, and once we get things laid out, even taking and receiving the work instructions like we talked about, you need to ask questions again. Questions are the root of all understanding. So make sure you fully understand the work instructions you're receiving. Make sure we communicate the work instructions in an efficient and effective way, and follow up on the tasks. You can always ask your task lead to come down and take a look at it and make sure you got what you were thinking right and keep going before you get to a real point where you can't turn back. And I think a big thing that some people use is three-way communications. So somebody tells you what you're doing, you can repeat it to them and then they can confirm it with you. Make sure everybody's on the same page, doing the same thing, and completely understands the task before you move forward.
Yeah, I mean, communication is a very common breakdown that we see. You have someone potentially with a lot of experience and understanding of a project explaining to someone that's maybe new to the project, maybe has a little less experience, and sometimes there's some assumptions made that that person is thinking and seeing things the way you are. So again, just follow up on that communication, ensure that they really understand what's going on.
Really take the time to understand it. I think that would benefit the project immensely, just taking time and planning your communications and everything.
And again, that's going to lead us right into the next point, which is poor planning and scheduling. We can't stress this enough. We have the 7 Ps. We have hard hat stickers to try to remind the guys. Planning is where a lot of this rework can be eliminated. Taking that time, making sure that we have the proper manpower, make sure we have the right guys on the right tasks. We have to look and see some guys are better at other things, and we just need to play on those strengths and weaknesses and make sure that yes, we are educating and teaching guys tasks, we need to make sure that that's in a good environment, that they're not set out there to do something incorrectly. Planning comes down to material. Do we have the proper material? Do we have enough material? Do we get in a situation where we're trying to make something work because we didn't plan properly? Eventually we're going to have to go back and fix that. Tools are the same thing. If we don't have the proper tools or enough tools on a job, that comes down to that improper planning. And it's going to cause you to maybe try to use a tool for something it wasn't designed for, or something's just not going to look right. And we're going to have to take that time and go back and fix it anyway. So it just comes down to that planning.
To build on the planning a little bit, a lot of times we build a great plan, but we don't stick to it. So sticking to the plan, I think, is a thing we should talk about a little bit too. Like, when we try and change our plan midweek, we might not have all the material, we might not have the right guys on the job, we might not have the right tools. So we really need to stick the GC and tell them we're sticking to our plan. And that's where the last frustrating point is. A lot of times the GC will come in with a change and want us to change our plan for the week, and we're not ready to change our plan, and we try and accommodate them. But as design changes come about, they'll want them done right away, but we really need to plan those out. Make sure we get approval on the change orders, design changes before we go and do things, and try not to be so accommodating to them and really look out for our own interests. And that, I think, leads into our next segment on change orders. And that the last general GC causes item is the biggest thing on change orders, and we need to make sure we capture those in a timely and efficient manner.
Absolutely. I mean, Triumph is known as a customer service company, and a lot of times owners or general contractors will take liberties with that. They'll change schedules, they'll move other trades into areas that benefits them. And it's one of those things where we still need to be accommodating, but we need to ensure that if that's happening on our projects, that we're communicating that to our supervisors, and our supervisors are communicating that to the project managers, because there is a monetary value to that, and that there's a lot of information there that needs to be captured, and it needs to be communicated to general contractors to make sure that all parties are making out and have the best interest here.
You got to look big picture on what a small change can have a butterfly effect and ripple down the road, and you really got to look at the big picture and what that change is going to do to your project.
Absolutely. So Keith, I know we talked a lot about general contractor issues and things like that. One of the things that I want to just dive into a little bit more, especially from a project manager standpoint, this is sort of something you deal with on a daily basis, is the change orders. When we get in these situations where due to scheduling or due to another trade or a design flaw, things like that, what are some of the things that we need to be thinking about to make sure that we capture these change orders?
That's one of the causes of rework that we can actually capture cost on. Some of them, like if it's our own fault, we can't go after the GC for any cost or anything. But when it is a design change or it is a GC change, we can go after that cost. I think it'd be helpful to just explain what a change order is in general first. And it's really any change to the contract. It doesn't have to be a scope change. It can be a schedule change. It can be a change in your conditions. It can be like, hey, mechanical contractor and electrical contractor are now working in the same space, and it never was bid that way. So it's really any change to the contract documents. It doesn't have to be a scope change, but that's the easiest to identify. It may be a no cost change, but it might have other effects on the project. So you might have to submit for 5 extra days on the project. So it doesn't have to be a cost, and it doesn't have to be a scope change, but it's really a general overall change to the project.
So with a change order, that could be a T&M work that we do, or it could be something where we have to, put an estimate together and bid on that work as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so a lot of the ones we do is time and material, fill out tickets at the end of the day, get them signed by the general contractor. They agree that we're doing this on a T&M basis, or a lot of times they'll ask for a quote or a proposal, and we'll put an estimate together, send it in, need to wait for approval, which is a turnaround process before we get started on it. But before we work on a change order, we need to make sure everybody agrees. We don't own it. We need to move forward with something, and how to determine that, I think, is a good process to go through.
So if we've identified something that we feel is a change order, what kind of information do we need to get to our supervisors and our project managers just to ensure that we do have that buy-in from the customer, from the owner, to ensure that we do get compensated for that, whether it's scope work or schedule changes and things like that? So
we need to gather as much evidence as we can. We need to go through the contract documents. We need to look at the drawing changes, look at the schedules. Any document we have that we can prepare and present to the GC for backup to a change order is important. Pictures, the drawing markups on plan grid that we've been doing, I think is a big help. And even baselines. So going through, again, schedule changes, I think is a harder one to identify, and we've been working internally a lot to get work and money back for schedule changes, because that's a frustrating part. So we've been making some charts and graphs about the baseline schedule and schedule updates, and showing where the general contractor is behind on other trades at no fault to us, but we should have been so far along on the project, and we're not yet. So we got to somehow find a way to incorporate that into the next future update. But really, kind of circle back, any sort of document is helpful to present to the owner for a change order.
So I think some of the other things that we can do to ensure that we have that documentation is if we do added scope work. It's very, very important to keep track of the amount of material you use. If we used rental equipment in doing that, I mean, those are all costs that we can capture and recover from. Any amount of time that we spend on that. And when we put that together, it just has to be very, very accurate. So if the customer or the owner comes back to us and asks us to justify this cost, we want to make sure that we're able to do that as honestly and accurately as possible.
Yeah, the big thing you touched on is honestly. So we don't want to fluff change orders. We want to be honest with our customers. We want to recover the cost that we needed to recover plus our markup. We want to be honest with everybody, and that's an important part to touch on. But like you said, everything is associated with that change order. So if we do have rental equipment, we're entitled to get costs back for rental equipment. Even payroll, overhead, like anything associated with that change, which is a big bubble, we're entitled for cost on.
So I think it's very, very important that when we identify, or if we even question anything that would fall under the change order, a change of scope, change of schedule, time and material, anything like that, I think it's very, very important, to immediately go to your supervisor, project manager, get everyone together, get the general contractor or the owner all involved and have that conversation just to ensure that there's no surprises and that everyone is aware that this is scope change, it's all agreed upon, and that we just document it very, very well.
Absolutely. Just to reiterate, if you come across anything in the field, talk to your PM, talk to your super, and get those guys engaged early.
So Keith, we've covered a lot of information here today. And one of the things that I like to make sure that we do is I want to let everyone know, how much we appreciate their work. We understand, the jobs, and we understand the demand that they put on the individuals and things like that. All we're asking is to just be aware of some of the things we talked about today. A little bit of effort, a little more planning, a little better communication can really have a very large impact on our wasted time, on our rework. It can just make us be a lot more successful as a company.
We know you guys put a lot of effort into these projects, and we know rework is going to happen at some level, but we want to try and minimize that as much as possible. And we appreciate all the hard work. We appreciate all the effort. And I thank you guys for what you're doing in the field today.